but more in particular on Everton right now and the situation of Frank Lampard. Oh, where do Everton go from here? They've got a really, really tough set of fixtures coming up. Next is Arsenal, then it's Liverpool. You've got Leeds and Villa to come as well. Oh, do they stick or twist?
You twist. You make the change. Yeah. And it's nothing personal. And you know I get messages because I speak about Lampard. We see them come on air sometimes. It's not personal at all. It's what I see. You know, he's won 27% of his games.
Yeah.
He made a big change in the summer with his coaching staff, and Duncan Ferguson left. I'd install him to the end of the season. I'd say, come and do a job for us. You did it before. Calvert-Lewin played his best football under him.
That's still been a very strange departure, hasn't it, Duncan Ferguson?
He said he wanted to obviously go into management. He's not done a thing
Well, that was
since.
the statement that was put out, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I would make the change because I think it's got to a stage. And to some level, Frank has got a little bit of leeway because the reaction with the fans and the hatred of the board and problems. And I get all that. And I get that Frank's in a really difficult situation, how he's running his team and trying to get something going. But it's not working on the pitch as well. So it's not, it's been sidetracked by what's happening at the board level. Well, OK, that's one issue. But there's been many a club that have been wrong upstairs that still the manager's doing his job and winning games, enough games. Everton are a huge football club. And the fear of going down for the club is more important. So if it means sacrificing a manager, and the bottom line is it comes down to what are you watching? What did you see yesterday? Did you see a game that was, the goalkeeper for West Ham, Fabianski, made loads of saves and Everton were unlucky? They were a non-event most of the game. So you can't allow this malaise to continue. You have to make a big call. And it would seem unfair to certain people. But guess what? Management is unfair now. Sometimes it's harsh. People have lost their jobs in way worse scenarios than this. They're second from bottom.
You look at their stats, though, Cass, from that game yesterday. They were very dominant in a lot of areas. Total passes, 713 in comparison to 341 for West Ham. Completed of passes was 623 in comparison to 271. I know we've spoken a lot about possession and whether you can read much into that, but 68% they had. Now, the biggest issue was goal attempts. That was a lot lower than what West Ham had. But shots on goal, 4 for West Ham, 2 to Everton. That's been their biggest problem, obviously, scoring goals and getting the best out of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which we haven't seen at all. And I know he's had injury problems, but he doesn't look like the same Dominic Calvert-Lewin that we saw a few seasons ago. And you mentioned there Duncan Ferguson, and he's talked about it. He's talked about how Ferguson really helped to bring the best out of him. And so maybe that would be the right move to make. I don't know if you saw that video that went round on social media yesterday of Frank Lampard prior to the West Ham game. Somewhere, it looks like a hotel perhaps, I might be wrong, but it looks like a hotel area where he is basically amongst some Everton fans who have come across him, and he looked frightened. He looked shell-shocked.
Yeah,
and that's not to say that those fans were intimidating him, because actually they were backing him. They were saying, we're right behind you. But I think for him, it just, in that moment, captured on that video, it just looked as though he was thinking, I don't know what's going to happen next. And again, I'm not saying those Everton fans were in any way intimidating him, but I think it's just in that one moment, it made you think, wow, this whole situation has really got to you. And I'm not surprised, because it's such a difficult time for him, the club. And you talk about the boardroom issues. They're massive boardroom issues. The disharmony, the toxicity that we've talked about many times now, unfortunately, the disconnect between the fans and the board. Who's going to want to come into a club where it's that fractious?
Duncan Ferguson will, because he loves it.
For a time.
Look, you need sometimes, there is obviously a reaction sometimes you get by adding someone new into the club. Yeah. I don't like the idea of sacking, and I feel sorry for Frank in many ways. But if you're talking about possession football, well, you've got Paul Clement as your assistant, who's the first team head coach on about the style of play and what you implement. And Paul Clement is a very possession-based manager, or was at Swansea. Our Swansea fans, he was. I remember watching him. I remember Tammy Abrams going to Swansea and thinking, bad move, you're centre forward, you're not going to get many goals there. Because the way that Paul Clement plays his football is very possession-based. But if you're not hurting teams or playing with purpose, then you've got another problem there. And Unfortunately, football's brutal. When I was a striker and I missed chances and I didn't score enough goals, people got rid of me. So I had to look at why they got rid of me, because I didn't produce enough. So that football, not only as players, as managers, they're tough choices sometimes for clubs. But Frank's job is to win football matches. And at the moment, they don't look like winning anything. They don't even look like getting a draw out of a game, which will take them down. That will scare the life out of the fans and the club. So
well, I
it's
think
inevitable.
the fans are already scared, to be honest. And we'll be talking to a fan a little bit later on in the show. A fan will be joining us to give us his take on the situation at his beloved Everton. And as I say, a really, really difficult spell of fixtures coming up. League leaders Arsenal next, followed by Liverpool, Leeds and Villa. And you mentioned winning games is what you're brought into as a manager. And unfortunately for Frank Lampard, he's only won 12 of his 44 games in charge. So not a great record. And there is suggestions that it could be it for Frank Lampard. Although Farhad Moshiri has come out, hasn't he, a few times recently and said, look, he's got my backing. But then when asked questions yesterday afterwards, when I know some of the cameras were on him as he was leaving London Stadium, he sort of said, well, it's not my decision, which I think a lot of people were like, what does that mean? But I think he meant overall, don't just ask me, it's got to be a group decision. It's got to be a collective board decision. So there are some conversations perhaps to be had on the future of Frank Lampard.
Sunday Sports Breakfast with Natalie Sawyer and Tony Cascarino. Sunday mornings from 6 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.